Hi, this is Don, and I'm an old school kind of guy. Now today I want to talk to you about some terms. I don't see them thrown around too often these days, but every once in a while they pop up, and I'm sure they confuse some people. They're terms I saw a lot more often back in the old school days. So here we go. The terms are, as the title suggests, WC, F1, F2, F3, and so forth. So let's just talk about those today and try and explain them. Now, like I said, not everyone uses them these days, and when I see them used, most often I see them used incorrectly. So let me just set the book straight so that everyone understands what the original design was for these terms, and we don't all have our own different definitions. Somebody recently said, well, I know that this isn't legitimately an F1, but I call it an F1, and here's why. You can't do that, people. If there is a legal term and you go into a court of law, it's got to be the exact legal term. You can't just say, well, pro bono means that I'm for Sonny Bono. No! In a court of law, pro bono has a very specific meaning. Well, in the world of science, terms have very specific meanings. So that's why I want to bring this up. I'm not actually an expert on this topic. I have read books on it. I have read magazines on it. I've read books where they use it. And I have done some research. And I will admit that most of that research was 40 years ago. So what, or 35 at least. What I'm going to tell you is that I confess I went out this week and I did some more research just to refresh my memory, and I'll throw out what I know here. These terms are all about the genetics, and it's about keeping track of bloodlines. So where do we go? WC. WC means wild caught. Unfortunately, you will find many stores, distributors, and sellers on Aquabid, eBay, wherever, that will use the term WC or wild caught, and they really have no clue as to whether their fish were wild caught or not. Maybe somebody bought some wild caught fish from a local fish store, but the local fish store said they were wild caught because the distributor said they were wild caught, and all he meant was that the wholesaler went out and caught them out of his fish pond where he grew them out. If you are buying angelfish and they're wild caught, that means they were imported from South America. Hello? That's what it means. They are wild caught. You cannot use that term unless you know. Unless you know who caught them, where they caught them, and the exact chain of custody all the way to you. If you're using wild caught under any other set of circumstances, you are either wrong or you're lucky. But most of the time you're going to be wrong. Just because your fish store says wild caught, or just because somebody on the website, even the big stores. I know one of the stores that is a big seller of fish, and I like them. They do a good job. I've never bought from them. I will. But they labeled some fish wild caught that I don't think anybody's imported wild caught in decades. So you got to be careful there. Now the F numbers. F0 means wild caught. If you see the term F0, it means wild caught. I don't see that one too often. Didn't see it in the old days. But so what does F1 mean? F1 means offspring of two wild caught fish. That's what it means. There's no other meaning for it. If you have a wild caught and an F1 and you breed them together, it is not an F1. It's also not an F2. It's a crossbreed or an inbreed. By the way, ideally, if you're breeding fish, you want perhaps wild caught mom and dad, that's fine. But if you're breeding F1s, you know what's ideal is if you get F1s from this wild caught and F1s from this wild caught. Even if they're caught in the same vicinity, if they're caught a year apart, chances are good they're not the same bloodline, or at least diluted down. Okay, so F2 would mean that both parents were F1s. Okay, so there you go. That's how the whole thing goes. I very rarely saw the term F3 used except when talking in the old days, the original books about guppies or discus. Those were the two species I saw this whole concept talked about the most. So why is all this important? Well, one thing is if you've got some F0s or wild caught, I'm going to tell you they are harder to breed and they're harder just to keep alive. I have a bunch of wild caught fish here. Every one of them is autosynchronous. Those things are still hard to breed and they still imported. Do I know mine are wild caught? Nope, I don't. Have I bred mine? Nope. Have I tried? Yep. Do I know how? Yep. Haven't managed to do it yet. If I sell mine, I'm not going to sell them as F1s. I'm going to sell them as autosynchronous. I can't prove the chain of custody. I can just assume, even though the local fish store said they were wild caught, he probably can't prove it either. Or maybe we could, but it cost me a lot of money. Listen, I don't care. I'm not in this to create a new line or anything. I'm just here to watch my fish. And so I don't worry about this stuff. But a lot of people do, so I'm sharing. Hey, do you even know where those terms come from? They actually come from the plant world. So if you want to go back and study all this, that's where the whole genetic system of F0, F1, F2, F3, that came from the plant world. Wild caught came from the fish world, okay? So let's throw out, if you just wanted to hear all the real serious stuff, I'm done. I'm going to throw out some, what I call interesting little tidbits. Interesting to me, at least. Somebody asked me, and this was 25 years ago, which fish were first classified using this system? The answer is, I have no clue. First ones I saw, I already mentioned, guppies and discus. Even the most hardcore breeders just don't even talk about this anymore. They sort of assume all their fish are tank raised, or as some will abbreviate it as a TR. And the reason you don't usually hear about it beyond F3, because even by that point, sometimes it's hard to, unless you're serious, it's hard to keep track of what they are. And so everyone just assumes that if you got a T4 or beyond, you probably got some tank raised mixed in there, or some crossbreeding with different F levels. The F stands for filial generations. F-I-L-I-A-L, it's a Latin word meaning father. So filial generation. And the number stands for generations removed from the original parents. So like I said, two F0 parents produce F1 fry, and some people are mistaken. They think, well, F1 means the first batch from these parents. That's one of the mistakes people make. Well, these are F1s because they're the first batch from my parents. No, the F1 means first generation from wild caught, and that's every batch, every brood of eggs or fry from those parents is F1, not just the first one. So that's a misconception. So F0 crossed with F0 gives you an F1. F1 crossed with F1 gives you F2. F0 crossed with F1 gives you tank raised, polluted. Now, if that's done all the time to get new colors or patterns or whatever. Let's see. Oh, here's a good one. If you have F1s from this wild caught and F1s from this wild caught, if you breed those F1s, what do you have? Yeah, you have F2s. So anyway, I don't know. I skipped part of my notes, and I've gone long enough. If you're really into the genetics, you need to study it for yourself. You aren't going to learn enough from anybody on a YouTube unless they're doing an hour-long YouTube. And I'm too boring to do that. Hey, everyone out there, whether you're keeping track and what you're breeding, whether you're trying to set a strain or looking for the actual genetics, just do it because you're having fun. You got it? Bye.